Welcome to this roundtable from Foodservice Consultant Society International FCSI, today focusing on technology and equipment innovation for the educational food service sector. I'm Michael Jones from Progressive Content and Editorial Director of FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine. This roundtable is very kindly supported by Welbilt and will address how innovative food service technology and cutting-edge equipment for both the front and back of house is helping K-12 and higher education food service operators to improve operational flow and to create efficiencies in both kitchens and serving areas, plus how innovation is helping to create a safer, more hygienic food service environment in both schools and colleges for students and staff during the COVID pandemic. I'm very pleased to be joined today by our expert panel. We have two top consultants, a very experienced food service operator and the Chief Innovation Officer of Welbilt. I'll now ask each of them in turn to introduce themselves and to also tell us a little bit about their own business. Beth, ladies first, can we start with you, please?
Yes, I'm Beth Wallace, and I'm the Executive Director for Jeffco Schools, otherwise known as Jefferson County Public Schools in Denver, Colorado. We are a large district with about 82,000 kids. We have 150 sites. About 450 employees, and we are considered unique in that we're a large school district and we are considered low, free, and reduced meals. So we are only 30% free and reduced. So that's kind of an interesting challenge that we deal with.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beth. Tarah?
Hi, and thanks for having me, Michael. I'm Tarah Schroeder. I'm an executive principal at Ricca Design Studios. A fellow Denverite with Beth, based here in Colorado. I work on projects all over the country in various markets. Most of my projects tend to be colleges and universities and higher ed. So excited for the conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tarah. And Scott?
Scott Reitano with the Reitano Design Group. And interesting, I'm not in Denver, but in Indianapolis, Indiana, although our temperatures over the next week or so will make me feel like we are in Denver. But our firm, Reitano Design Group, we like to say regional force and a national voice. Certainly we do a variety of products throughout the Midwest, but on a more national and actually international basis, do a significant amount in the K-12 sector. We also play in the higher ed sector, but it'll be fun to contrast between Tarah and I in terms of one versus the other. And Beth, at your size, that's just going to be interesting to listen and learn how you scale up at that kind of level. So this will be fun.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. And Rick?
So once again, hi everyone, and Rick Caron, Chief Innovation Officer for Welbilt. I joined the company about 15 years ago, and my job is really thinking about the future of our industry, where it's going, getting our 20 or so design centers working together collaboratively around what I call more integrated solutions. We're in a lot of categories, and the biggest innovations are at the intersection of those categories.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rick. Beth, from the top then, can you give us an overview, please, from your perspective at both Jeffco, but also from your purview of the SNA, of the type of technology and food service equipment that's had a really big impact on the sector for you this past year? What's really sort of moved the dial in this sector, and how has technology made a difference to the operations that you guys operate and run during the COVID pandemic?
When all this occurred, literally I had 2 days to shift from a normal operation to I have to serve kids remotely in a different environment. One of the factors that has driven us, and I think will continue to drive, is touchless. How can we reduce touching? How can we make sure we're being safe and sanitize everything we can? We still, to this day, focus on that. Some of the equipment that I didn't think I was going to ever have an interest in and had to kind of shift to were mobile hand wash sinks, digital, thermometers, outdoor heaters, outdoor dining space, transporting very large amount of already prepackaged food. And some of those I think will stay with us, particularly with our electronics, our point of sale that type of thing, we're going to want to be able to not have to touch anything. We're going to have that desire to not touch cash is going to continue. And while everyone thinks, well, credit cards, well, K-12 hasn't really been able to embrace the credit card like probably universities have, because they don't like the responsibilities with a credit card in an educational K-12 system. And so, touchless exchange of money, those types of things are definitely the trends, that I've dealt with this year.
Very interesting to hear those challenges, Beth. Tarah, coming to you as a design consultant, what are some of the key challenges that your operator clients, perhaps in higher education food service, are currently facing? And also, how has technology helped them to navigate those challenges?
I think it's very similar to what Beth has kind of mentioned, that they've had to kind of turn on a dime and try to come up with different strategies pretty quickly. And especially for higher ed, for them, there's many different types of food service operations on a single campus often. So, retail is going to have different challenges than all you care to eat. And it was actually the all you care to eat facilities that were the ones that really had to adopt and shift. And, talking to different folks around the country, everyone had a slightly different approach. So much so, it's pretty wonderful to see the community come together and have calls just to say, what are you doing? What is working for you on your campus, and what can we adopt? But in a lot of ways, it was directions that the campuses were already headed, right? Going cashierless. Well, now suddenly they just had to adopt it that much faster. Just because of shifting staff. And that's a lot of how the technology has helped, is just to make the operations more efficient, and then also to allow different team members to have different roles. So instead of somebody being at a cashier station, they become sort of like a hospitality greeter. Right. So kind of helping students figure out, okay, where am I supposed to stand? How am I supposed to get my food, and how this has all changed. I think a lot of campuses were already doing mobile ordering, but the ones that didn't quickly had to learn how to do it, just because of queuing, reducing the queues and the all you care to eat, or just even trying to facilitate grab and go and pick up and delivery and all of that. That's kind of how the technology has really supported colleges and universities.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tarah. And Scott, how does that resonate with your experience too? And also, what kind of innovation has made the biggest positive change on perhaps the K-12 sector in your experience this past year?
First of all, I'd love to give a kind of a shout out to Beth and all of the food service directors that we see in that K-12. I mean, Beth, you were very polite about quote unquote shifting. How about pivoting again? Oh, wait a minute, we're going to go this way tomorrow. Can you make that happen? And school boards stepping in and saying, nope, we're going to do this. And then the science tells them differently. And it's just unbelievable and I'm sure, Tarah, you've seen it as well, unbelievable what we see nationwide in terms of the ability for school nutrition folks to feed children. It's quite frankly gratifying to see a bit of a spotlight on school nutrition and folks understanding what an important piece of the educational model that is. And Tarah, the one thing I was going to add that we've seen recently on Purdue University's campus is that delivery, like they've got robots now out delivering food. But overall, it's interesting, and Beth said it, we're living through the COVID pandemic, got it. But on the other side of that, some of that stuff stays with us. And so one of Tarah and I's colleagues coined the term, because I certainly didn't, but cleanliness theater. Oh, there's washing stations, or we've gone cashless, and why? And then the stuff that sticks, and Tarah, you're seeing the same thing. We refer to it as the acceleration of trends. Like mobile ordering was already here. In fact, Beth and I are going to see it in the K-12 market even more. Delivery is about putting food where our customer base is. On a college campus, that might be delivery. On a large high school, we might have a senior area that all of a sudden it's not taboo to say, look, we're going to have a food locker for you in this corridor because those kids can't make it all the way down to lunch. But those are the things I think we see trend acceleration on demand. I think you're going to, the temperature safety, as we're moving food to different places, that's going to pay attention. I think you'll see more blast chilling going on. Those are the types of things that we see.
Brilliant. Thank you, Scott. Rick, Scott just mentioned trend acceleration there. From the perspective of you and your colleagues in the R&D team, how has COVID spurred innovation even quicker in this segment? How has it sped things up?
Yeah, I mean, I would say super acceleration. It created a sense of urgency around change. I mean, some people look at our industry and say, oh, it moves at glacial speed. Well, the glaciers are melting pretty fast, with COVID. And, I've seen things happen, and I've been doing this for a while at speeds that I've never seen happen before. So, we were kind of bragging in the past about how our industry was recession-proof. 2008, 2009 took a slight dip, and now, 30%, 40% extinction events for a whole bunch of market segments. And so, just building on what Scott was saying, it's amazing what I heard from these cafeteria managers on what they had to do at a moment's notice. And so, yeah, sanitizing, and, that's not necessarily always the easiest, because the ammonia, the chlorine system, some people are allergic. So, the innovations around that, ozone's a key technology that I think is going to emerge. This whole idea of unitization of the food, pre-cook. Here we got U.S. Foods delivering, the food, and then they said, well, we put it in the magic oven. I said, what's the magic oven? The combi. And I never thought about the combi for that with the press and go, but it really made their life easier. And I had no idea about the food waste, because this county is pretty affluent, but the extra food would go to other counties that aren't. You can't do that with COVID. Right. The 30% waste factor on thousands of meals. It's just blowing my mind here. So, the industry needs to be more resilient long term, for sure. As a food equipment manufacturer, we want to make sure we provide those solutions, and we'll talk about that over the time. But the resourcefulness of the people, incredible. And I think one of the technologies that we don't think about so much is just the information technology. How we get the information to these people, because the OEMs actually that have already sold the equipment, that equipment could do a lot more. But generally 10% or 15% of the equipment is actually used because it wasn't trained, for this type of environment. So just summing up, a sense of urgency, incredible, speed that we've never seen. And since I'm an innovation guy, I love it, right? The change all spells opportunity for us.
Thank you, Rick. A question, I guess an open-ended question really for both Tarah and Scott. Rick just mentioned there in terms of the kind of the impetus this puts on both resourcefulness, but also the type of environment that operators are working in. From a design perspective, how has COVID changed how you are designing both back and front of house food service operations with regards to things like flow?
So, I think it's about, again, it's, some things that were already happening, and with different types of operations, it's had a different impact. So, for retail, there was already a shrinking sort of front of house, right? And you kind of see the same thing happening in different chains and fast casual, in the direction that they're going too. Just, having more space for there to be the operations and to accommodate the so many different ways that the food can be distributed. It can be delivered, it can be picked up, it can be ordered ahead of time, it can be ordered there, So just making sure that that can happen. And that actually is also true for all you care to eat, just, having back of house spaces that can accommodate all those different means. And then flexibility has been something that we've talked about for a while in terms of, menu, and then in terms of, multi-purpose spaces. But now it's almost to the point of being able to reconfigure, having a design that can be reconfigured, because, there might be a need today, but that need might be different 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And for a lot of these spaces, we're designing a space that needs to last, 30, 40, 50 years. So all of that needs to be thought of ahead of time. And then even just thinking through, how grab and go has changed. I think there were micro markets was kind of the buzzword maybe a year or two ago. And now I think it's thinking about what is, walkout technology look like, in these spaces? Those are different types of conversations that we're starting to have. And also there's definitely some conversations about, electrification, decarbonization, thinking about things in terms of sustainability, environmental footprint, and food waste. And so that comes into play in design as well, for thinking about central warewashing and how, with different schools that are looking to cut down on packaging and offer instead, reusable clamshells, what does that look like when you then factor in delivery and to go and having a central place for warewashing?
I just think it's interesting that some of these things, and Beth, you live it every day, some of these things are one versus the other. Like to say handheld amongst the group of students that we're talking about, whether they be college or high school on down, is a much bigger category, and grab and go. Or I loved what you said about the shrinking front of the house, meaning ghost kitchens to a certain degree. People want to just come in and pick things up, or having that kitchen that can deliver right out of it, but they don't want as much of a retail experience. And I think that is happening on the retail side also to a certain degree, happening on Beth's side of it, if you will, or at the collegiate level for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how quickly our society goes back to wanting the social interaction, versus just pick it up and take it to their small group or their pod or whoever they feel safe with. And that's going to lend itself to that. But when we talk about food waste and not just the food itself, but the packaging piece of it, we run into things where, yep, we'll put you a trash receptacle that says recycling here, here, and here, and then some high school kid's just going to ruin it by throwing it in the wrong one, or, hey, that's all compostable, great, but there's nowhere to compost it in this area. Those are the system has to catch up, I think, to a certain degree. But some of those, we can go right back to trends accelerating, that those things aren't going away. Our society's paying attention to things like food waste and packaging waste at a much higher level than perhaps we ever have in the past.
Brilliant. Thank you, Scott. Well, we're definitely going to come back to food waste and packaging in a moment.
Sure.
But Beth, let's bring you in there. Scott mentioned there about the system catching up, and obviously you're dealing with very rapidly sort of shifting sands here. How much will President Biden's new executive orders, particularly those relating to things like providing free meals even when schools are shut, affect school operations, and what are the repercussions and benefits?
That is just a key initiative. I could probably talk on this topic for 2 hours, but free meals for students, or meals at no cost is what I like to call it, has been something that has been discussed for 30, 40 years, in that it's part of educational process. Textbooks, you get textbooks, and now we've moved to digital, but there are so many challenges that we face in the K-12 industry. Meals at no charge would really eliminate a lot of problems that we have out there. And I think during this pandemic that we've gone through, we've seen school meals are extremely regulated, no salt, no sugar, whole grain, and that's great, and we love and support healthy meals, but guess what? That's not what they eat when they go home, so they don't think the food is good because they're used to salt and full fat cheese and things like that we don't offer. So we have seen during this pandemic that our families that can afford to buy meals don't participate with us. They just get their meals from home or where else. I don't think it's going to have a huge shift if that were to pass for participation. I think you'll see a slight tweak, up tweak. But I think the fear across the nation of, that's going to cost us billions and billions to give everyone, a free meal. I don't think we're going to see that. So I think you're going to see a little bit of participation uptick, but I don't think there's going to need to be this mass change in our serving model or what we're doing.
I also love what Beth said in regards to school food, and there's the perception of, it's school food. And in 2011, when Mrs. Obama came out and the USDA followed suit and they said, hey, you're going to serve healthier school lunches. Man, we all agree, yes, we want to serve healthier lunches or whatnot, but we've turned the tide a little bit in the conversation and said we want to entice children to eat healthier.
Yeah.
So Tarah and I get involved in that in terms of the physical space. Like, it's not supposed to look like an institution. What does the food experience look like? And Tarah, quite frankly, we take a lot of our cues from what you guys have done at the university level, and how do you bring that food experience to match the kids? Put the food in the right places and display it right and present it appropriately. And let them move through that. But at the same time, I really believe if we say things along the lines of, hey, we want to reduce food waste. Great. Do not serve a whole grain crust that tastes horrible that the kids aren't going to eat anyway. Yeah. On the plate does not mean they're going to eat it. So let's entice them to eat healthier by maybe where we put things, how we put things, how we present it.
Well, and to that point, exactly what you're saying, I drive every single day to make sure that environment those kids walk into is cool and they want to be there. I don't care if you're 6 years old, you need to feel like this is a cool place to go. And that is a mammoth shift in the K-12 world. Yep. Mammoth shift. And, I've got 150 that I'm trying to turn and renovate. And, I can only do a few at a time.
In terms of how you manage those 150 sites, Beth, and talking about, obviously we talked about the regulation changing at the moment. What else influences your strategy in terms of when you implement new equipment, when you install new technology? What are the biggest factors in play, as well as new regulation? I'm thinking budget. Is there a season in terms of when you tend to refurb or refit?
Most of the schools used to have a lot of money before the changing of the regulations about 10 years ago. Okay, and when we shifted to the Healthy Hunger Kids Free Act, majority saw participation drop and our revenues drop. Okay, I used to make $100,000 a year at a high school in Texas because of what I could sell, and I bet you they're not making a dime today. So everyone needs to understand that shifting, that they used to have money to invest and remodel schools, and that has kind of dwindled. So, but now you see it come in with bond issues. So now they're trying to handle that money with bond issues. So there's two ways that, schools look at how they have money to remodel. And bond issues will always be there. I always like to tell the different consultants I work with, hey, we're the one that's kind of free of economy. We still have to build kitchens. We still have to buy equipment. And it doesn't really matter what the economy's doing. We're kind of here to stay. And by the way, we always pay our bills. Okay. So those are two good things.
Those are two good things.
Yeah, but I think what the average person probably doesn't realize is that when you walk into a bigger district, and I can tell you this is the way at Denver Public Schools, Jeffco, y'all would be shocked to know that I had 70 schools without a walk-in freezer.
Oh. Wow.
Goodness.
Wow.
70. So some of us are just trying, just trying to get the bare necessities. But I want to be sure, and I heard y'all talking about it, is that we get flexible equipment. I don't buy a steam well anymore that won't go hot, cold, frozen.
Yep.
It's got to flex because someone else said it. You know what? That line is still going to be there 40 years from now. Yeah. And I'm going to have to be able to shift and move and adapt. As it's got to be flexible, and I design it so that I can cover anything I could think of coming forward, and because I know I won't have the money like a restaurant would to remodel in 10 years. I got to have everything there.
Yeah, go ahead, Beth. I totally agree. I mean, this equipment, and we've been trained, to design our equipment so it lasts forever. And, the problem is the technology moves faster than the equipment wears out. So we've got the strategy around creating want-in versus wear-out for the demand for our equipment. So certainly flexibility is key, cleanability, the digital side is really important. And I don't think, that's really, and that's the role of the consultant comes in, because, if you specify equipment today and it's not connected, it's a dinosaur tomorrow. Because you can download programs, you can make it much easier to use the equipment. And service, oh my God, the stories I heard on Saturday about what happens when equipment goes down, a flight wear washer, and they're using the 3-compartment sink and they're already down 2 people on labor. Absolutely. Service, there's no reason to have direct service calls with connectivity. So these walk-ins should be connected. They should have ozone systems to increase the shelf life of the food. So yeah, I completely agree. We'll get into that in a little more detail, but I think the role of the consultant needs to understand some of these technologies that were considered nice to have in the past, and now I think they're absolutely essential to pivot in a world that's continuing to change. And I think our industry is going to bounce forward. I don't think it's going to bounce back to what it was. It's going to bounce forward to a new equilibrium culture around food service. I do think table service will come back. People like to go in and have that experience, but not right away. So, Beth, I completely agree with you. And there's a long list there. And, I think that maybe the OEMs don't communicate that stuff enough, because there's a lot of information. And how do you connect the dots between all of those capabilities and the need? And the key is the financial benefit. Yeah. It has to financially pencil. And unless you really understand the operation, it's hard to show the economics around some of these additional features.
I don't think you're going to be able to walk away from this call without talking about the severity of the labor shortage.
Yeah, it's significant.
And that is across the country, because with S&A, I talk with people across the country. The labor shortage is critical. I think y'all should know that our reimbursement rate, what we get for a free meal, is $3.70-ish. I can't pay $15 an hour with that reimbursement rate. I'm supposed to be a business and break even. I support good wages for employees, but the federal government is going to have to recognize if they do that piece, then all their reimbursements for everything else they have to do have to go up as well. I thought
it's a domino effect.
Yeah. I thought the pandemic would help us with labor. I think there's going to be this big rush between all the retail outlets and schools and everyone, and we're not going to have anyone to work.
Thank you, Beth. Tarah, to bring you in on that, Rick's point there about more connected and multifunctional equipment, can that help solve, at least to some degree, the labour shortage that Beth was just highlighting? What role does technology have to play with that?
Yeah, I think it is the key challenge. It comes up in every project, comes up in every conversation. First, we're looking at each square footage as if it's gold. How can we get the most out of this and have it do the most? But then, how can we make this operation run with 2 or 3 people, where maybe in the past it would be 5 or 6? So I think having connected equipment is just going to make everything run more efficiently, so that you can have less people working there. I think too, it's why, robotics in the kitchen, it's something that, seems, I think we're still a little bit a ways from there, but, people are piloting it. People are trying it. They want to figure out different solutions so that things can be more automated. And looking at different areas, I think that's, we talked about cashier lists, and that's one place, but then also looking at those repetitive tasks, right? Like in the dish room or different areas of prep in the back of house, so that you can actually, the folks that you have can be more out front or can be doing more complicated tasks. But I think we're gonna, we need more of a push in that area to try to help solve this very real challenge.
Scott, would you like to add to that at all?
Yeah, interesting, the cashier list piece of it. literally would go hand in hand with universal free lunch. You know what I mean? And that's a vital position as well. I love that idea. I'll try to give you credit as often as possible on that, Tarah, but I like that. Yeah, I had written down as I thought about this, we talk about technology and no one goes, hey, what's K-12 doing in technology? We're not on the cutting edge of any of that. But in my eyes, the technology, two things. Number one, it has to play to the audience. In other words, it has to solve a problem or move us forward. And so, to have an iPhone basically on the front of your combi oven is great, but if no one knows how or why they're using that and they just want to go time, temperature, and go, then that didn't really help us. So the connectivity that would allow Beth to basically set recipes from her office or someone on your staff, of course, but set the recipes from there allows for a little less trained employee maybe to still pull off a high food quality kind of scenario, or to Tarah's point, spend their time in the places we want them to spend their time, food preparation and presentation, those kind of places. And then the other piece of it, a dear friend of mine, Christy White, just started an organization to specifically go train in schools, because when Tarah and I are done with a project and here comes the kitchen equipment contractor and they put the package in and every manufacturer's rep shows up and well, Beth, you've lived this all summer. Hey, okay, here's how you use your combi oven, and next onto the dish room, and that guy goes for another half hour, and then onto a mixer or whatever's next. Man, you have more questions than you have answers at that point in time. So what does the continuous, and this would be, Rick, this would be the challenge back to manufacturers. What are we doing in terms of continuous training that says Beth's staff just turned over? Can we get somebody back in there? Or the remote piece of it. Now, the world's gotten much more used to Zoom calls. Can we have a Zoom class, if you will, on that type of thing? But some way that allows, you didn't just spend the same amount of money you'd spend on a small luxury vehicle for your combi oven steamer, and by the way, 3 months later, it's the big steamer in the corner. You're not using it to its full capacity.
Yeah, when I talked about information transfer or dissemination, all the technology is there, the information is there, but it's not getting to the right places. So that's a huge opportunity. Amen. Even in our own company here, Welbilt, we've got this digital resource library. You can drown in it. So we got to figure out a better way to get the information to the people that need it. Incidentally, in terms of connectivity, the number one reason why our customers want it is recipe distribution over the air. I was driven from convenience stores. So if you got 2,000 ovens and you want to do an LTO, you don't want to be shipping USB sticks. There's too much manual error. But getting the information out, is key. And I keep on coming back to this financial benefit. And just as I was listening to you speak, I kind of wrote, since we're talking about education and school system, right? So I just wrote a little equation that the financial benefit really comes down to some key factors. The quality of the food in the numerator, that should be a big number, right?
Sure.
Is quality food drives sales. Flexibility is really key. Equipment needs to do more than one thing. So you want that a big number, but in the denominator, the skill level, that should be a small number, right? And we talked about automation, we talked about cognitive automation. I think helping decision-making is key. And then time, we want time to be a small number. So I think there's ways of actually taking the benefits and making them financially measurable to justify, the investments around the equipment. And to me, that's the role of consultants. And the solutions are different depending on the application. There's not one size fits all. Right. But I think the themes that we just talked about of quality, flexibility, time, skill level, and we'll get into labor and waste, I think, a little bit later, but it's a very fascinating discussion that we're having.
Beth, would you like to weigh in on that? And the formula that Rick just presented there, is that something that makes sense to use? It's something that chimes?
Absolutely. I love it. I wish I was that smart. Solve my problems and write out that equation. That was awesome.
Yeah. Scott, we touched on it briefly already, but a real passion, I've spoken to you about this a number of times, a real passion you have is for promoting better nutrition for kids in the sector. Is there a role that equipment or technology can play in improving what kids get served to eat? Is there some factor? Is it just about installing less fryers, or what role does technology have to play in nutrition?
I think, and I think we touched on this, in an all-you-care-to-eat atmosphere, if you will, or meals at no cost Still liking that, Beth. I think the more kids still eat with their eyes like the rest of us do. So the flexibility of maybe the pizza blanks are coming from the back. So the crust, the sauce, the cheese, but I'm finishing those in a speed oven out front. I'm cutting them and serving them. That flexibility from a technology standpoint of I'm a hot well today and I'm a cold well tomorrow and I'm going frozen the day after that, or even that's now spread to frost tops versus heated shelves. And so I think that plays into it as well. But again, I'll go back to the phrase enticing children to eat healthier. Mm-hmm. Whatever we can do to make it more appealing, and even down to, the food cues, where we put the fruits and vegetables versus where we serve the entree. What comes first? 68% of our plate, I guess, is full on the first three things in a buffet. So, all right, let's make sure, especially at the younger ages, and remember, this doesn't play like K through 12 isn't one segment. These are our children at 5 and 7 years old, and again at 12 and 13, where we may want to just freeze dry them at that age, by the way, middle school, and a high school kid, and man, high school kids, we're taking a ton of cues from what our collegiate folks have done, because our kids don't think of ethnic food as ethnic food anymore. It's just food. Yeah. And so I listen and learn to all of those things we're talking about. And I come back to the factor, Beth, how many, when you say you're down 100 employees, out of how many is that?
Out of 460, we're down 100.
So you're down like almost a quarter of your employees. And we see that across the board. So when we talk about, man, how do you adapt to COVID-like or pandemic type conditions, and folks are like, oh, I want to make sure everything's served and they've got gloves on. We can't afford in the K through 12 segment not to have some portion of a self-serve element, if you will, which is fine, because if I put it on my plate or on my tray, I'm more apt to eat it anyway at any age, which leads right into a reduction of food waste. Let them choose, let them customize. All of those things matter, but that has to play in concert, I think, to the real life issue. And I don't think this is going away, that our labor pool is not getting bigger.
No. So
entice children to eat healthier by allowing them opportunities to choose and customize.
Tarah, what's your view on that from the sort of higher ed perspective?
As far as nutrition, well, I had a couple of thoughts. One is, the meals at no cost, or just even thinking about K through 12. I think that would give so much flexibility, because the truth is too is, in some ways, all you care to eat is a term from a couple of years ago. Now it's almost more all day dining, right? Yes. Just thinking about how Gen Z and Alpha Gen, how they eat, right? It's lots of small meals throughout the day. And then that too kind of helps with size of kitchen needed. It helps with size of space. It helps with food waste, everything we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But back to nutrition, I've definitely seen, kind of everything everyone said, I agree with. It really depends on the culture of the district, on the school, on, the different constraints that everyone is facing as far as what the right solution is. But definitely for some of the colleges and universities, even some of the school districts, the K through 12 school districts that we've worked with, have found, okay, when we're looking at the intersection of nutrition and labor shortage and costs and all of that, they have looked at having a central commissary as a solution to help help in a lot of ways that can then distribute to the different schools. I'm kind of curious about this. Is that a solution that you see for Jeffco, or kind of what, where does that fit with what you're looking at in all of those different areas?
We've already done a study with a consultant, have a full-on plan laid out. We're kind of ready to roll and put it forward here in Jeffco, and COVID hit. So, that's a probably a $30 to a $32 million hit, wow, for our district. But to tell you the truth, moving forward into the future, if we had had that set up when COVID hit, we would have been ready to roll, shift, prepackaged. We could have done everything and done it much more efficiently with much fewer employees, which we didn't have to begin with.
The perception of fresh doesn't go away because you went to a central kitchen. I mean, you package things appropriately. I mean, kids are eating sushi out of prepackaged kind of setup. So their perception of fresh doesn't necessarily say, did you scratch cook it right here at my school, especially the cold items and things like that.
Yeah, and I would say, I think that's one of the biggest mega trends in the whole industry. And so as you look to 2025, I've written some white papers on this. I think out of, let's say, 3 trillion food service globally, 1 trillion of that will be ghost kitchens, cloud kitchens. I mean, Travis Kalanick, the early CEO of Uber, he upended the whole personal transportation with a digital platform. That's happening right now at Cloud Kitchen. And Travis is the CEO. So and it's going to completely change the whole experience of where people eat, when they eat. And I think it's going to impact school systems. So it's a big one. And, our whole company is really pivoting around what these kitchens are. And they will be connected. And there'll be smart cloud systems that operate on top of that. So, we were talking about robots. I'm not sure about robots so much coming into kitchens because, we got a lot of robots here. They don't like grease. They don't like water. There's maintenance. But I think that what I would call invisible robots, you don't see robots driving cars like in the old movies. The Tesla drives itself. It's embedded. So conscious automation, cognitive automation, helping decision making. And I do see some automation coming, but not necessarily in the area of specific robots. But cloud kitchens, ghost kitchens, big deal.
So staying on this very sort of forward-looking theme, let's close out. I'd like to ask you all the same question here. We're going to stay with you, Rick, to answer first, please. On the massive assumption that we return to some normality globally later this year, we all get vaccinated and think, COVID hopefully is very much in the rearview mirror. What do you think will be the most pivotal type of technology for education food service operators beyond 2021? As we move on from the pandemic, what are you most excited to see rolling out in terms of new equipment, new innovation? Rick, can we go with you first, please?
Yeah, and I'll just touch. We talked about a lot of it, so I'll just touch upon it as a wrap, and then mention a couple of things maybe we didn't discuss as much. So, I think thinking about the kitchen as a system, it really is an operating system. It's not a series of individual unit operations, but it's a system, and what the system has to do is different depending on the school. We talked about flexibility, speed, labor. We could have a whole nother session around that. I think connectivity is something that deserves a whole new session. That's huge. I think holding technology is underestimated because part of the magic of creating this experience is still great food. I think that those are some of the areas that I think are key. And lastly, I would just mention ozone. Ozone, it's oxygen with an extra oxygen molecule, so it's O3. And it doesn't like being O3. It wants to lose that oxygen, and it discharges an electron. And those electrons zap and kill microbes. And then there's nothing. There's no chemical residue, ammonia, chlorine, and it's coming. And so I think as you hear the word ozone, don't think about the ozone layer and damage to the planet. Think about the great sanitation it can do. And there's no adverse reaction. People aren't allergic to it. It basically disappears and turns to oxygen. And it's got a very high kill rate. And I think with increased frequency of sanitation, ozone-based solutions are really important to look out for.
Really interesting. Thank you, Rick. Tarah, the same question to you. What's the kind of innovation or technology or equipment that you're most excited about and looking forward to in the future?
I definitely think that those who don't have mobile apps or haven't figured it out, I think that's going to be a big focus for them. And then owning that data and being flexible to change that app a lot, respond to changing menus, changing times, changing schedules, all of that's going to be really critical. At least for college and university, delivery is definitely something that's talked about a lot. And those food bots, food delivery bots are kind of taking college campuses by storm. And so, but really thinking about the holding capabilities of those will be interesting to see how that technology comes along. I think it's going to be interesting to watch how 5G changes how we do food service, in the coming years. I think that's going to change just the availability of data. And also, being able to get that in real time is going to change operations eventually. So that's kind of interesting to watch. As far as what I'm most excited about, a lot of it comes to that food waste piece. Yeah. And, bioplastics and compostables and new packaging and containers. I think that's what's going to come out of this, is that there's going to be a larger demand for thinking through, what that looks like, reusable to-go containers as well as ones that don't just end up in a landfill.
Well, let's hope so. Great stuff. Thank you, Tarah. And same question to you, please, Scott.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I think I love what Tarah had to say, and I don't think, Rick, you're off base at all. My whole take on what comes out of technology next is usability of that technology. In other words, does it meet a need? When I think of food waste and cutting waste, we need to measure it to understand it on the pre-consumer side. What's available there, and our friends at LeanPath have really shined a light on that. And beyond that, I just want to make sure that it matches, that we collectively as an industry are listening to Beth and her compatriots in regard to what they need the technology to do for them. We know what the issues are in regard to labor, in regard to food quality, not technology for technology's sake, but technology to solve issues.
Wonderful. Great message. Thank you, Scott. And Beth, the same question to you.
What I would add to that is, obviously, I think I mentioned the central kitchen, and Rick, you mentioned that you see that really is where we're going in the future. I do believe that's true, and I think what you're going to see is a district like Jeffco come up with a central production kitchen and share services with smaller districts around it. So I think you're going to see a lot of partnering of that type of operation. I think back to the technology piece, I wish, I can tell I've got 4 really great brains on here. I wish you would figure out how, from an institutional setting, we can pre-order and have food set up. You have to remember that probably works at a university or college because they have a little more time to eat. Sometimes I'm required to get kids 200 and 300 kids through a line in 15 minutes. And I just don't know how you have that ordering app and get it all distributed that quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's all production control. I mean, it's interesting, if we broaden the discussion, and I don't mean to because we're focused, on this topic, but if we look at all of the technologies in the world and that are converging on each other, and exponentially changing. Definitely 5G. That's a big change. And then you got cloud. So what you just said, Beth, is fully capable through a smart cloud operating system. But you need the IoT, right? The IoT is the pipes back to the equipment to get the data. Because if you don't have the data, if you don't measure it, you can't control it. And then the AI is all about intelligent agents going into the appliances to help the people run it. And then we didn't talk so much about blockchain, but that's coming. I think that by the end of the decade, all the fresh food supply chain in the United States will be on blockchain. Yeah. No, it's very possible, and we're at a really exciting time in this industry when you look at the convergence of those technologies.
This has been a really great discussion, guys, with fantastic insight from our guests, Beth, Tarah, Scott, and Rick. I'd like to thank you all very, very much for taking the time and being such wonderful guests today. I'd like to thank Welbilt for their continued support. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to fcsi.org for future events. Thank you.